Please not. Do we have quorum. Is Sandino going to be here today?
We don't know.
Okay. That sounds like him. Welcome to September 11th, 2019, Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting. I would like to start with a roll call.
Jonathan Dodson.
Present.
Tasha Egan. Here. Ophelia Cancio. Here. Richard McCown. Avis Scaramucci. Sandy Thompson. And Brent Wall.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Mike. Good job, guys. I would now like to, number 2 is approval of minutes.
I'll motion to approve minutes.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor of approval of minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? Abstain? All right, we're good. We have no cases withdrawn or continuance requests. We don't have anything on the consent docket or cases for individual consideration. In other business, we have the downtown development framework, and then we need to go through the 2020 meeting schedule. Want to go through the downtown development framework?
Yes. Lisa Chronister, Planning Department.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mr. McCown, you're just in time. So I don't remember who was on the board in 2015 when the downtown development framework, which this is my well-worn desk copy, when it first came through all the committees and planning commission, but that was toward the end of 2015, and the last year and a half, almost 2 years, planning staff has been working to update it. We haven't been referencing this document very much in Bricktown cases because when we did the 2016 Bricktown Code update, we integrated a lot of the recommendations and guidelines from the DDF. We integrated them into some of the new code provisions. So we haven't done that in any of the other districts yet. This body may not be as familiar with the DDF as some of the other ones, which, like for downtown, for example, we reference this in almost every case. So if you're thinking, hey, did I miss something, you didn't. But still, we've been working on an update. Like I said, it's been almost 4 years exactly since this guideline was created, and a lot has changed. For example, 4 years ago, we didn't know where the convention center site was going to be. The streetcar layout hadn't been completely finalized. It certainly, hadn't been installed. So the DDF, what is it? It's an adopted plan. It's been adopted by City Council, Planning Commission, and all of the design review districts, including this one. Before we integrated it into the Bricktown ordinance, this body adopted it for reference. It has 2 parts. One is a policy guide that is used to prioritize capital improvement projects. It's used for TIF guidelines, and it sets, a framework, expectations of how certain parts of downtown will develop, and we'll get more into that later. And it has some more detailed building fenestration guidelines, streetscape dimension guidelines that the ordinance didn't get into that much detail, but this has more detail, so we reference it for streetscapes. So the components, there's several sections: development framework, transportation framework, the street design, building design. So obviously those are the 2 sections we reference the most in design review. And this document, if you're not used to leafing through it, it's in your binder. And then an updated copy was sent out in the packet. So what have we been doing? The vast majority of changes were various pieces of cleanup. I mean, there were some technical issues with misspellings, and street names were not listed, and you couldn't read some things because they were obscuring other things. So we updated and corrected all the maps. We did some things like added thumbnails to make it all more user-friendly, and we updated references throughout. So that was the vast majority of the work was these things, which are important to usability, but not substantive changes. But the main changes we did were to update some of the development typologies. We deleted the building topology matrix and the planning guide because they were incredibly difficult to interpret and to explain to people and to keep updated, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. We established a new section to address streetcar and park frontage priority areas because in the first version, nothing we thought accurately captured how development on those two really important frontages needed to be designed. And then updated some of the street typologies. But I'm going to run through this pretty quickly because there weren't hardly any changes to Bricktown. Most of the changes were outside of Bricktown, and that's why I sketched in a boundary of Bricktown. So you can tell at a glance on this map, we changed the color of Bricktown. We changed the color of Automobile Alley. They're now the same color. That is to designate them as a historic special destination area. I mean, when you think about it, Automobile Alley and Bricktown are a lot alike. They take their character from red brick warehouse and early 20th century buildings. They are organized around specific corridors, and we want to preserve that character at the same time, make sure we are providing for appropriate infill. So the development typologies of those two areas, they both changed, and now they match each other. The building typology compatibility matrix, the intent of this matrix was to say, hey, there's all these different building typologies, and some are fully, immediately compatible with others, and some are only partially, but it wasn't ever defined, what threshold or items of compatibility made them fully or wholly compatible. It was a judgment call, and staff believed that that compatibility is ensured by all the rest of our design guidelines. So we just are taking this matrix out. But I'm reminded to back up a little bit because who here, this is the first time they're seeing this presentation? Okay, Kasha. Staff has presented it to the bid board, the Bricktown board, Automobile Alley board, Midtown board. We've done several rounds of outreach. We've also, through most of this process, been working hand in hand with the Alliance to capture things they were hearing from developers, and then we capture things we had been observing in our work to implement the ordinance. So we deleted the building typology compatibility matrix. Not that we don't want compatibility, but we believe compatibility is assured in other ways. We deleted the future development plan and guide. This was probably the most difficult item in the whole book to explain to people and to interpret, because it was both aspirational and trying to capture existing market conditions, neither of which anybody is able to do very well, and we have no process to keep it live updated. So we are taking it out where we thought there were important descriptions of density and massing. We incorporated that into the paragraph descriptions. Things like, because this chart did capture important things like assumed number of stories, dwelling units per acre, items like that. And if we still needed to capture that information, we put it over here. So it's gone. Establish streetcar and park frontage priority areas. This was one of the primary things that the Alliance for Economic Development asked us to look at, because the streetcar and the parks are huge investments. So what goes on them needs to be mixed use, it needs to be big, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be at the street, it does not need to be a parking garage. So all of those things are captured. So this is a new map in the book. It shows the routes, the frontages, and it captures, what should be the priorities for design in these areas. And when I was mentioning how the Alliance uses this document for TIF, they have their own TIF guidelines, and those are based on, they're not going to award TIF to things that don't maximize these design requirements. So we established this, so that does touch Bricktown. Updated certain street typologies. Nothing in Bricktown changed. I showing the border just to show that. Trying to look at what we did. We did it like the producers co-op had been shown kind of undefined, and the block of the convention center had been shown kind of undefined. We did update some of the deep deuce streets right here at number 7 to reflect what they actually are. So this is the second committee I've presented this to. I'll present it to all the committees, asking them to make a recommendation to the Planning Commission so that it can all be captured as an official, so that the changes can be captured as a supplemental guideline. But like I said, we don't use this very much we staff don't reference it very much in Bricktown because most everything that the DDF recommended for Bricktown was captured in the 2016 ordinance update. And that was stuff like, where we defined East Bricktown from West Bricktown and established different regulations and guidelines for each of them in terms of height and number of stories. We incorporated the lot coverage guidelines in the ordinance. We increased the building facade transparency guidelines to meet what the DDF specified as opposed to what the old ordinance said. We incorporated all the pedestrian zone guidelines in terms of amenity zone, streetscape zone, amenity and streetscape zone, pedestrian zone, and storefront zone. And we referenced the building frontage designations from, I don't have a slide with that, but with the street typologies reference building frontage. So all of that was captured in 2016. So with that, I'll answer questions. I'm sure you have many.
Does anyone have any questions?
So it looks like you've already had a study session with the Planning Commission, so they're kind of already on board for the big master plan that they're working on as well, or is this really it? That they're simultaneously...
Are you talking, we did have a study session with Planning Commission. It's usually my personal preference to present things I'm going to be presenting to the committee, to present them to the study session first in case they have any big picture concerns. So yes, we did that this summer.
I did have a question. I didn't get a chance to look through the entire package, but I did look at Section 2 for transportation framework. And like page 23, it says that it's not very effective at describing the other parts of circulation network.
I'm sorry, hold on. Was it page 22?
23, sorry.
23, yes.
It said there that it's not very effective at describing other parts of circulation, like alternative modes of transportation. I was thinking about how this would be a great opportunity to incorporate connectivity between each of the districts and the alternative forms of transportation connecting those districts. I didn't see anything like that in here. That would be a recommendation.
Correct. This captures the street network. There is, and it is not diagrammed for connectivity. There is a separate plan for Bike Walk OKC that captures the bike lanes and bike priority areas, and that is also captured in the DDF. Yeah, there's a transit network page on page 34 that captures the bus routes, the transit hub, and then I know there's a bike. Bicycle network is captured on page 31. And yes, we have had conversations about the extent to which all of these should be shown graphically overlapping, and there's some challenges with that. But are you saying you just want to make sure that the concept of connectivity is captured?
Yeah, just like since I know Bricktown, we really want to promote also like the walkability, that aspect of it, just kind of having something where that shows these are the best walking paths, the bike lanes, everything kind of connecting the districts. And is the Boathouse District considered in here? Okay, back to your first question. Yeah, nothing is, where sidewalks are concerned, nothing is designated as the best route, because it's the grid, and it is assumed that everything is going to be constructed as a pleasant, clear path, made usable by the sidewalk guidelines, made pleasant by facade design, made active by density along the route. So all of the streets on this map are assumed to be made active and pleasant by the accumulation of all the guidelines. So the other question was, is the Boathouse District in the DDF? I don't believe it is. Yeah, it is not detailed. Nothing about it is detailed. I would just, my last comment would just be kind of being able to connect to some of those districts that even bring the connectivity from the neighborhoods and the areas to, there doesn't seem to, just as a citizen walking around the area, there doesn't seem to be a connection. So I think that if there was something to kind of show the connectivity to those neighborhoods. Can you be a little more specific? Yeah, that was one of them specifically, was the Boathouse District. There's an entire neighborhood there that, there's not a connectivity from the Boathouse into Bricktown, and the proximity is really close.
then there's also like over there on the Walker area, there's those homes on Walker and like the churches and stuff like that. So just, being able to bring those in more easily, I guess.
Right, okay, yeah, that's a good point. Like if you were to walk from here to Little Flower Church or from here to Boathouse District, it's extremely challenging.
Yeah.
Right, yes. So, okay, yes, I'll think through how we can capture some of those concerns.
So a couple of questions, I think in a related fashion to the ones that we were just covering. Stick this thing somewhere. Okay, so we don't include the Boathouse District or I think Lower Bricktown in the DDF, is that correct?
Correct, Lower Bricktown is a PUD that was established 20 years ago. We've had this conversation.
I know.
Yes.
I know that.
So yes, we don't capture it because its network is not part of our network. It's in the PUD.
Yeah, I know. So I won't rehash the entire arguments of the past, but I will just say that it's really hard to have I feel like a comprehensive downtown design framework, particularly east of the railroad tracks, so east of the BNSF viaduct, and not incorporate what I actually think are two critical sort of points. So we have Deep Deuce, obviously, the areas to the north of there, I guess we'd call it Walnut, Harrison, that area, which all of those have experienced significant development. So then, but then as you come south, it just, I guess I just want to, my question would be, or observations, it seems to be a true statement that outside of the Producers Co-op area, which I think is also prime for development, east of the railroads, east of the railroads and south of Reno is not a part of the sort of downtown conversation as far as what structures or how we should guide development or what kind of suggestion we got. It just seems like a big miss because I know that a lot of development is coming that way.
Yes, this document is focused on the quote downtown as defined from 13th to the river, from 235 to Western. So that's the extent of this plan. The Innovation District plan goes from 235 east, many blocks, and from I-40 up to, I was going to say 16th, yeah.
Yeah, depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
13th or 23rd or Capitol Irons or whatever.
The purpose of this plan is to focus on downtown. These boundaries were used because everything on this map is zoned DTD 1, DTD 2, DBD, Bricktown. I mean, it's all zoned in a downtown design district. I wonder if what people are perceiving is, well, like Reno, for example. So obviously Reno Avenue is a connector, should be, and it is designated as such, and there are streetscape guidelines for it. All of these, if people are walking around and notice gaps in that connectivity, I think it's because just a project hasn't come in to close the gap yet. But the standards for what that will look like when it comes through are established. Because, this is not requiring anybody to fill in those gaps now.
Yeah.
Some of them are scheduled for sales tax, some are scheduled for bond.
No, and that's not really necessarily what I'm suggesting. I guess it's just, my observation is just, especially sitting in a seat on this committee talking about Bricktown. So the south border of Bricktown boundary or whatever is Reno, I think as I understand it now, because of the massive PUD to the south of Reno. And so it just seems like everything south of Bricktown is actually not really reflected in the design framework for downtown, although it does, I think the river, the Boathouse District, Lower Bricktown, those areas to the river would qualify as part of sort of the downtown core and fabric. Reno, I think, is a major connector. And part of the reason why I bring it up is because I think increasingly going back to sort of walkability and things and just reinforcing, I think, the general notion that Bricktown in particular is one of the most walkable neighborhoods, parts of the community that exists. It's just really hard. So I agree that we have good, we have some good guidelines and things like that in Bricktown, but it just seems like in the context of us as a committee reviewing this document and the broader note, I mean, if I'm looking at it and sort of giving comments, I can look at and see, well, maybe there's some things we should think about in relation to Bricktown and Deep Deuce, or in relation to Bricktown and crossing the railroad tracks, but I can't look at anything south, which is a huge miss to me as far as thinking about what kind of development we're encouraging, thinking about what kind of guidelines and framework we're putting in place for development, which in places largely a lot of public land, a lot of other kinds of oversight. So that's really the observation I'm making, is that it seems like the southeast portion of the downtown core area is actually excluded from the downtown design framework.
Yes, the short answer is yes. I will tell you, I've had many meetings with the developers of the Producers Co-op site, and always in the conversation is, how are we connecting west? How are we connecting north? And as you know, their northern connectivity is there's like one chance to do that. Their southern connectivity is non-existent because of the highway. But so this document is the very core of downtown. Yes, of course, there's a whole nother many blocks out to, at least Penn, right? If not, at least 23rd, at least Penn, at least Southwest 25th, that we want the same connectivity for biking, walking, not just focused on automobiles. The code update that is under contract, development code update, will capture a lot of how we get those up to speed.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm just thinking about, so I read a lot of blogs and stuff about what people might do, what people were thinking about doing, and what people were going to do but not going to do anymore. And it just seems like, obviously south of the park, I've seen pictures of 15-story, 20-story high-rises, abutting right up to the edge of the river, things like that. So, it seems like, and that's pretty clearly identified that we want a certain level of massing and density, right, along the park. So I've seen similar, actually, maybe they're dreams or proposals or things that people have pitched for other places along the north shore of the river, which I think is a part of the downtown sort of deal. So I don't know, maybe there's not really much more of an answer for me to say. My observation is that we are just really missing a large swath of where we really need to be able to sort of, the purpose for this kind of framework and for this kind of policy document is actually missing, I think, the complementary, areas to the core to shore area that I think is where really where we have the most opportunity for this document to be of influence. So that's probably my statement.
Sure. Yeah, I don't disagree, and I will talk back to the department about what's the next layer of that. We can't, we just practically speaking can't do a DDF for the whole city, but...
Is there no way, if there was a PUD that was specified 20 years ago, are we basically not able to come in and put any kind of, is that just, it's memorialized forever?
It is memorialized forever until they rezone. If they came in to rezone, they would be evaluated against the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan designates a certain density and criteria for that. I don't have the book in front of me, so I can tell you what those are, but until they rezone, until they choose to rezone, there's no...
Is there a way...
We could designate, let me think of find a good example.
There's not a mechanism to require review when they aren't required to go through any of these design review processes or anything. They can just get a permit like anywhere else in the city that's not, downtown.
Right, and
design review areas.
yeah, and okay, the area south of Bricktown, so I'm just going to flip through these slides and talk through it to see if that answers questions. So it is captured on our development typology plan as, and I can't read the text from where I am, but it's a special destination, I believe. Yeah. So it's designated, it's captured. It's not shown, it's not in Bricktown Design Review, so it's not shown as a Bricktown district, but it is captured as a development typology. Okay, we've deleted that matrix, we deleted the guide. Before we deleted this plan, the original DDF did designate different typologies that if it were to rezone, this is how it would rezone. Well, but that was part of the problem with this plan. Did these colors document what was there now? Did it document what it should be? Did it document what it could be? And those questions got harder and harder to answer, so that's why we deleted this plan. Streetcar frontage, so I will look, I'm almost positive there's no public streets through the PUD, and that's why they don't show up on our street typology matrix. There are pieces of public right-of-way in the Producers Co-op, but there are no, quote, public streets, end quote. Similar for Boathouse District, there are none, they're private drives. So anyway, I just used that, so that's why they weren't they are not designated, they don't exist, they don't legally exist.
And I guess from a developer standpoint, in my work, I understand the need for PUDs, and I think they're really valuable, especially when you're trying to redevelop a certain area. But we don't have any expectation that how we're developing it now will be the right development decision in 20 years. And so it's almost like there should be and I know this is outside of the scope we're talking about, but I wonder how other cities are handling this when such a big swath of land is basically removed from any kind of oversight from the city, because 20 years ago when it was designated, there was nothing going on.
Yeah, and could you speak to the comment about the Boathouse District? I mean, I think Lincoln is a public street, and I'm not trying to be obtuse either. But I'm really trying to understand. So we put, like the citizens through maps put tens of millions of dollars into development around the Boathouse District, and so I can almost really suggest I'm speaking more to sort of the reasoning for excluding those elements from, again, the downtown design framework. Mostly just because I feel like if this document is what we use to sort of guide and say this is what we want or expect to see or would like to be considered, or to guide sort of ordinances, things of that nature, it just seems like it's a miss when we know Producers Co-op, the goal is for something to be there at some point in the near future. We know that the goal is to develop the river and things of that nature. I guess I'm just a little bit confused, and the reason why I think it is appropriate for this committee, at least in my considerations, because one of the biggest misses I feel like we have is the connectivity between the Boathouse District and Bricktown, however you define it. And so I just like to see something that spoke to the fact that we desire what
Okay,
we
well,
desire.
and again, I'll say that it is not ignored. Okay, the PUD is designated as special destination typology, and then in the pages that aren't in the slideshow but that are in your book on page 14, well, that's the historic, but there's the non-historic. Special destination typology is on page 15, and that captures Lower Bricktown, it captures the Boathouse District, it describes expectations of what that will be. a wide range of types, from large-scale venues and big-box retail to historic structures and pedestrian-oriented mixed-use construction. So it does capture a vision of what that is. Lower Bricktown, a primarily automobile-oriented dining, entertainment, and shopping area centered around the Bricktown Canal. So it's described as automobile-oriented because that's what it is. That is what it is, and there's no mechanism to change that. The Boathouse District, a sporting and entertainment area oriented toward the river. Yes, okay. The Arena Convention Center area, concentration of visitor destinations including Chesapeake Arena, convention centers, related hotels, and supporting uses. So that is captured. Then Producers Co-op site. In the original DDF, we showed this grid network because we wanted to carve up into a walkable grid. Now that the boulevard's in, we know it cannot carve into the grid we are showing. There is one access point to the boulevard. There are two access points under the railroad. So we know this, as shown, cannot be achieved. We do have block pattern guidelines that specify recommended block lengths. But in terms of a typology, this is still designated high-intensity mixed use, right? I mean, that's everybody's vision for this site, I believe. Right? It's going to be tall, it's going to be big, it's going to be mixed use. So that is captured, I believe. Boathouse District, yeah, and unfortunately our call-out box blurs the Boathouse District, but it's a special destination typology right there with the street network as it exists. I will check what's a public street and what's a private street and make sure that that's documented accurately. What were the other aspects of the question? So, yes, I would just ask you, this is one document capturing an extremely small area of downtown. It is a document that staff uses to inform the committees. It's a document that the Alliance for Economic Development references in their development proposals, and that they've had a lot of feedback into forming. So I would just say I believe Lower Bricktown, it is captured. I mean, if you want us to study a street network through it, we can. I don't think it can happen because of the canal. I don't think it can physically happen. But, I mean, I'm happy to take specific suggestions of what we might do. I don't think it's helpful to do any sort of workshop about it without those stakeholders.
Other comments?
Yeah. In looking through here, I'm going to deviate a little bit from Bricktown, but hopefully it's sort of helpful to the bigger conversation. When I look through here, what I see is kind of a glaring omission in terms of just green infrastructure, low-impact development, particularly as it pertains to these newer districts going towards the river. I would argue that there's probably not a more important area in the whole city than the buffer areas along the river to try to slow water down, clean it before it goes into the river. So, we look through here, we have great street topologies, we have amenity zones, we have landscape buffers, we have all that, but we are totally lacking any kind of option for infiltration, street tree wells that can take water in and help water the trees. So especially like North Shore, even the co-op site, this part of the city is really unique in the sense that it's the lowest. It has the highest water table. It just geographically has a different, it's a different kind of biotype than you'll see other places in the city. So as a framework for development, developers need to have the option to be able to implement low-impact development. I would even argue that they shouldn't have the option because this part of town has taken some pretty heroic engineering efforts just to get the water out. The placement of I-40 where it is, there's a reason why it was elevated the first time, how it is now. So the Scissortail Park, upper and lower, are both acting as a pretty nice sponge. They're already implementing these ideas. So everything around it needs to kind of go with that. And we have a really, really unique opportunity here to create literally new districts within the city that can implement this kind of strategy to help clean the water and slow it down, infiltrate, all those things. And then one other note would be...
Hold on, right before you move on, are you saying you don't believe that the streetscape guidelines as described, are you saying you don't think they allow for low-impact development, or that they specifically don't allow for it, or that they don't encourage it enough?
They don't encourage it enough. Even in the graphic representation, everything is very traditional, kind of, in the description of the landscape buffers are, there's softscape is kind of the only word you get. But I would argue that if you don't put it in here, and a developer, they're either not going to know they can do it, they may not understand that it's an option. So showing the same, sort of giving the same level of graphic representation for that approach, I think would go a really long ways to just try to encourage that, and let people know that it is an option. I don't see anything in the document that says you can't do it, but there's definitely not anything saying that it's an option or that we highly encourage you to do so. So that would, I would love to see that in the document. And then just one step further is, again, since this area of town is lower, it's closer to the water table is higher down there. And so you're actually going to have a certain set of street trees that you don't want to even encourage the use of. So maybe some sort of reference back to the putting down roots document that has street trees listed, and then list the appropriate ones that maybe can handle a little bit wetter soil, lower oxygen levels. So this part of town is really fascinating. It's so different than anywhere else in the city, and we don't really have large-scale development along the river except for the Boathouse. And it's kind of up on the levee a little bit, and sort of doesn't really have the same sort of water table because it's up a little bit higher, but I think that whole area is going to...
Right. So I think I hear you're suggesting an update to trees and plants for Oklahoma City that specifies plantings that are more appropriate for high water table areas.
Yeah, the putting down roots document that...
Well, putting down roots was captured in trees and plants for Oklahoma City.
Right. So it's been a little while since I've looked at that, but I do think there are recommended street tree species in there.
There are in, but right now the primary source for street tree species recommendations is in Trees and Plants for Oklahoma City. It's on our website. I believe a copy's in your binder.
Okay.
Right now, there's not an infinite number of appropriate species of any type of planting in the document, but it is currently written, it assumes that all the street tree species on that list will work for any part of downtown.
Right.
And I agree, it sounds like that's likely not true.
Right.
And could be easily communicated
Yeah.
in an update to that document.
Yeah, if you can just sort of leverage some of the studies and pamphlets and information you have to kind of cross-reference, I think that would be really great.
Okay, yeah, that's a great comment.
Live microphone. If I could add to what Brent's talking about, when we were, and I know these things get updated, so I don't know what it says today, but when we were trying to plant the lace bark elm trees along 2nd Street in front of Level, we're very close to a water line. So we found ourselves in this caught in between the aspirations of Public Works and our own aspirations to put shade trees in, soften the edge of the building. No trees were required. It was just, it's like, well, you're downtown. You don't have to do this. Why are you doing this? You're a developer. You should be cutting every corner. I mean, that was what was being told to us. We're like, no, this is going to be very unpleasant if we don't put these trees in. And then so we had to go get in an argument with Public Works about, no, we'll use this root guard and we'll do all this stuff. If this could all get worked out ahead of time to where we're not putting developers in this tight spot between two different entities because the easy thing is just go, forget it, we won't put in the trees, saves money, keeps Public Works from being mad at us, etc. And I really think it's hugely important. The other thing that I'm seeing looking at the aerial photo, especially like the producers co-op space, huge opportunity to run like a green buffer around that because of so much drainage comes off of Lower Bricktown right there by the climbing tower. All of that could be constructed in a way as like a massive filtration garden, plus it would reduce the sound of the I-40, et cetera, and really make that pleasant. Plus it could become like a nice walking trail. I'm assuming some of that's going to go residential. It's such a big site. Anyway, there is, some opportunity for some green stuff to cut across the grid or to soften the edge of the grid in certain ways that probably won't happen unless we kind of get ahead of it, maybe.
That's a good suggestion.
Another sort of big opportunity for that, and I think you're showing it somewhat green on the west side of Shields, down on the very south end of this map. Anyway, I'm reminded of Walter Hood when he came here and talked about, like where is the forest, where are the woods, and downtown would be greatly strengthened if we sort of had woods to go to, because walking in a very productive forest or urban forest, you're out of the sun and the wind, or semi-protected from the wind. Anyway. The other question I have on this is when does this all go for a final vote / approval or adoption, or what are, and before, like on the 23rd, the Alliance has an RFP information session on a site that's really changed, the E.K. Gaylord site between
The 4th and...
and 3rd and 4th, I think.
Yeah.
And it used to be in the dark red, meaning high density, imagining like a 10-story tower there, and now it's in the, mid-rise, more like, 4 to 5 story building, which makes sense, actually. Makes much sense.
Okay.
And so the question is, like, this tool, as I've understood it, has really been used if you wanted to participate in that kind of, urban renewal RFP, or you wanted to have access to TIF funding or any other kind of, you didn't have to follow it. I mean, you could get a building permit according to your zoning, but on the other hand, if you
want incentives.
If you want any incentives and you want a better shot at getting through urban design review, then you should pay attention to this document. So it's sort of questions like when does this become official, and how should we be thinking about stuff between now and November when these things are due?
Okay, well, the development typology of the site didn't change. It's still high-intensity mixed use. Let me see if I can get it's right there is what we're talking about, right? So it hasn't changed. So it's, well.
The map that's being deleted, it used to be a different, right there.
Well, yeah, that's being deleted. I haven't seen the latest edition of the RFP that you're talking. You know, they've let it several times in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
The Alliance can specify, they could, well, back up. As for today, for the last 4 years, this plan is legally in the document. It is a guideline. It has not been removed. If this change goes through, it will be removed. So the document that the Alliance is referencing today is the one that shows the extremely high density. If this goes away, they can still write in what they think is the qualifier to their RFP. You're right, if you don't want incentives, you only have to be 3 stories.
Okay. The change from the salmon color to the new lighter salmon color is huge. And
I'm sorry, Richard, what map are you looking at? Because this is
that one. If you go back to the one you just had.
But this, we're just...
See it, currently the golden, or not golden, but the
dark
mustard,
brown,
Dijon mustard colored, yeah.
Yes, right there is where right there is where we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's right there.
It's just
sorry, I'm on the wrong
X.
It's right below the X. That's why I can't
No,
find
it's right above the X, a little over to the left. There you go. You're on it.
Yes.
See, that is a significant change from that salmon color to the new urban general. And it went from...
Where are you seeing the urban general?
Now if you go back to your previous map, see how it's gathered together with like everything in deep deuce?
It's not urban general.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's high intensity mixed use.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
But it's...
Yes.
It was in a 10-story category, and now it's in a 5-story category.
Yes.
And that is a massive improvement. And now the site has development, economic viability, if you will. It's already been tested thoroughly, and a 10-story building can't work. So the last time...
Can or cannot?
Cannot. There's no way you could you couldn't get the kind of rents that would need to be required to build a 10-story building at that location for sure. Maybe not anywhere for residential rent yet. But the last time we did this, there was a whole lot of input from various stakeholders on their specific pieces of property, and I didn't know if like the Alliance weighed in on this because of...
Absolutely.
Huh?
Yeah, the Alliance has worked with us to develop all of these changes in the last 18 to 24 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But what your story does, I think, illustrate the point of deleting this map. Why should we show an aspiration of 10 stories if 10 stories doesn't ever work? But, heights are unlimited per the code, so if somebody does get it to work, it would be allowed.
I was going to also expand a little bit on what Brent was talking about. And page 42 shows just the traffic zones, kind of like cross sections, and just to kind of expand on what he was mentioning about like water treatment and drainage and stuff like that, to incorporate That, I think that would be a good location to incorporate options for like bioswales
Yeah.
or something like that, to encourage that option.
Good discussion. So I was asking for a recommendation. I understand if you want me to come back with more information at the next meeting. Again, I would just recap by saying there were hardly any changes to the Bricktown portions because we'd already incorporated so many of the guidelines into the ordinance.
It sounds like, if I'm summarizing, the main recommendation that had possibility was to incorporate the trees and plants for Oklahoma City document and referencing that in regard.
It's already referenced in your ordinance. It's already adopted by reference in your ordinance.
I guess in terms of the variation of types of trees.
But yeah, we need to, it sounds like we need to update it. We need to study updating it.
Okay. So that's going to be done outside of this, is that correct?
Yeah.
Are there any other recommendations that we need to make that would prevent us from approving or voting for recommendation to approve changes to the supplemental guideline?
I think for me personally, I mean, I think showing, options for low-impact development in the document is very important. If I had my druthers, it would not be optional, but it's,
Sure.
and this is the time, if you're going to do something like that, that it needs to be done. So, I would love to see it as a mandatory requirement for districts, definitely within, a mile of the river or something, but I know I'm only one person in a big city, but that would be my personal preference for recommendation.
And then the comprehensive map, if it's possible, of like the modes of transportation and connectivity between the districts, and like kind of encouraging future connectivity to the neighborhoods.
Okay, do you have a suggestion of how far out that would go?
Well, just kind of, I feel like there's not like a clear visual of like the alternative and just the modes of transportation connectivity between each of the districts, and then the future encouragement to connect to like other districts and neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think that exists in Bike Walk OKC. I don't have it, but I can come back and represent it.
So is it best for us?
I don't think I need you to continue. Can they just take no action, and I can bring it back whenever I get it all pulled together? It's a recommendation.
Right, yeah, so if you wanted to not take action on it today, or if you wanted to continue, there's...
Yeah, we on the agenda, it's consideration and possible action.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, so we don't,
You're not required.
okay.
yeah, you don't have to act. I can just come back.
Does anyone
with-
want to motion to do something today?
Oh, no, you still have the meeting calendar.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We can focus on that. Okay, let's do that. This is a side note, Lisa, before, it would be interesting now with the Crosstown Boulevard mostly absent streetlights and other things that would be considered important, to actually look at our downtown being informed by the street itself. And so Klein is actually an interesting street. Instead of Western, we've always treated Western as kind of the western side of downtown. And really now with that Crosstown Boulevard, Klein is now the western side. And there is some significant real estate that is being changing hands right now. And I think we have an opportunity as a city to actually get on the front end of that. And Klein runs all the way down into Farmers Market, which I think will become a long-term important component of the urban framework of Oklahoma City. So for what it's worth, I do think because of that change, we should take a significant look at that and say, how does that impact how we develop there in the future?
Okay, yeah, that's a good comment.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for all your work on this. I know this is not easy, so.
I was really trying to correct typos.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully, our changing the dates doesn't take as long as that does, or looking at the 2020 schedule. There we go. All right. Do those dates look appropriate to everyone? All right. Someone want to make a motion to approve those dates?
I'll motion to approve the 2020 agenda.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion passes. All right, moving on to communication, administrative approval report.
Just some small cell antennas.
Okay.
Is that all part of the process that you presented on a while back? And is that going smoothly for you all, having to work with these?
Yes, they've been, I think people will be surprised at how good they've been to work with.
I have a question. Was there any opportunity for any feedback about the manhole cover comment, I think that's made by Mr. Dodson, in relation to these cell phone deals? I thought it was interesting, so I'm just curious if it came up in the conversations as they start to implement these.
I remember something about
Yeah, I've researched briefly some of the cities using actually manhole covers as they attach the cell service to that, and that actually...
Yeah, no, I haven't researched it. The small wireless facilities are allowed in the, we don't have any authority to ask them to use a different infrastructure.
All right. Yeah, I was just curious if it was, so it seemed like we were considering it, obviously, in the Bricktown area, and I understand why, or throughout downtown, it sounded like. So it just seemed, it just seemed like something else that may be worth considering, which is why I was curious if there's any conversation about it, not necessarily towards a requirement, because I think they're far down the road on this plan. It seems like, there were very limited things for us to even consider around what they were proposing to do. However, in the context of, these sort of smaller cell phone sort of towers and things like that, there are manhole covers all over the place, so it just seemed like it was kind of an intriguing question.
I had researched it through some cities were moving to that because that'll allow, it allows for better service, one, and then two, as you move into 5G, it allows a possibility for that. Whereas...
Yeah, it's interesting because all we hear is that things need to be tall and unobstructed. That's what I always hear.
Yeah, and there's a lot of language about like lines of sight, and these being more of like a Christmas light network that's going to be smaller, closer to the ground, and providing more coverage rather than the big cell towers that we're accustomed to now. But
So maybe that's the next.
Yeah,
next.
yeah.
But when we talk about moving some of these small cell locations, they often comment, well, if we put it there, it's behind a building, so that's not helping. We need it out closer to the street, so it's not obstructed.
I think it'd be worth just looking at if you guys, only so far that it would be, if we were taking a proactive approach to that, that could be interesting. It's not, if it doesn't work or it's financially not feasible for our city right now, that is obviously important, so. Any comments from the planning department staff?
We think we have a meeting on October 9th,
Okay. Maybe?
maybe.
I have one question. I know Michael's not here today, or at least I think I saw him. So I know that they've moved forward with, I believe it's to be the Renaissance site. It's like at Sheridan and was it Oklahoma, right? And I think that the design is going to remain primarily the same. Do we anticipate that they'll come back before the committee? Because I know there's been quite some time that's lapsed for that project.
Yes, they got their building permit based on the original design that was approved 2 or 3 years ago. That hopefully will be what you see on October 9th, because their approval's technically expired, so they do need to refresh it. What they've submitted is exactly the same. Like I said, their building permit had been already issued based on the last version that you guys approved.
So I think being that that site has remained undeveloped, it left time to not worry about where the flagpole was going. So is that then now a hot topic to consider where we move our flagpole? Or don't talk about flagpole?
Well, what flagpole? My understanding is there was an agreement with certain stakeholders and adjacent property owners and Downtown Oklahoma City Partnership on where it was going to be moved. And I noticed when I drove by the other day, it had not yet been moved. So I can't, as I'm talking to you, I don't remember what the decision was.
The 150-foot tall flagpole?
Yes.
It's standing.
I know, but it has to move for the new hotel.
Isn't it moving over next to the railroad?
Yeah, I thought it
on
was moving
on Sheridan?
south of,
On Reno.
or north of Reno, so that when you're on Reno sidewalk, you look north and you see it, because as the focal point of that new plaza strip.
I believe I saw it.
It's there.
Yeah,
It's standing up.
I believe I saw on Twitter today that today's the last day, and Twitter's always right.
It's standing at the hotel side, or it's standing on the plaza side?
It's down at the hotel site, a brand new flagpole,
Okay.
a brand new actual flagpole
Okay.
with mechanisms on the inside is in place.
That
The
was
crane
mine.
came out. It was
That was
really
mine.
cool. You could see one of them still standing. I think last Friday I sent one of our best journalists a photograph, and you could pan around and see the new one being hoisted up. It was cool. They were in sight of one another if you stood in the middle of the street on Oklahoma Avenue.
How's it look?
It looks great. It's 150 feet tall. It's a proper. I mean, you just push a button, I think, and the flag comes down. It's mechanical. There was also a story in the paper this morning. So it's good. They're reproducing all of the names of the donors for the bricks, because as they were taking the bricks up, they started breaking. So they photographed every brick twice. There's over 800 of them. And anyway, it's going to be spectacular. Maybe we should have a party out there and all get together and not discuss anything about good times.
Any comments from committee members?
Did everybody get a chance to go to one of the parking charrettes? It was great fun. I'm convinced we can add at least 200 on-street parking spaces in Bricktown. So I don't know how we can go about weighing in on that and sort of pushing it to.
Did you put your stickers up?
I did everything. I played all the games. There were 3 different games you could play.
There was like no limit to the number of stickers when I was there.
Yeah, it was. Had I known, I would have played for all you guys as well. Anyway, I think as these processes go, we'll be able to maybe intervene at some point and push on it if that's an option.
That is a question. Is Kimberly Horn coming to, I know they're having their own separate stakeholder meetings that DOKC is getting invitations sent out to, but since there's all these districts that are involved, downtown design review and the like, will they ever come and present or share in a more formal capacity rather than like, here's all the information we gathered, or is it going to just pop out what the...
I'm not sure. I don't know what their final product is going to look like. So, but these series of workshops were the committee's opportunity to have active input into the direction.
Jonathan gave me the steering wheel for now. He went to go get a drink of water. So are there any other comments before we close our meeting today? Okay, meeting adjourned at 10:10.